Libra. Libra rising, sun or moon. So for Libra, the full moon is happening, the full moon eclipse is happening in the 11th house. It's aspecting the 1st, the 4th, and the 7th. So like Cancer, it was another, this is the next cardinal sign, and it seems to be happening, stuff seems to be happening in angles again. So the 1st house, which is the self, the body. The 4th house, which is your emotional happiness house. The 7th house of partner. And then Rahu himself is in the 10th. So there's a lot of energy being moved around here too. And all these, there's 3 planets and the 2 nodes in movable signs. Now, the moon here in the 11th, the full moon in the 11th. So the 11th house significations are side ventures, the oldest sibling, winnings, social life, and your income from your job, your career, or your business. So the full moon is giving something there. And the eclipse is maybe hiding something or bringing something hidden out in the open. Now the sun is ruling this house, and the sun is not very strong right now. So maybe you're aware of the need for more than one stream of income in your life. And so you can think about that, because the full moon will give you ideas along those lines. It's aspecting the 1st house of the self and the body. So I'm going to let Neeshee address the body stuff, basically. Though the 1st house is also your appearance, and it's your path through life. So there may be some thinking about your path and how your path is either bringing in enough income for you or not quite enough income for you. And maybe there needs to be an adjustment in your path for that. It's aspecting the 4th house, its favorite house, its own house, natural house, of the inner emotional life. And for Libra, there's already a lot going on here. Now, Saturn being here just tends to make you feel separated from people in your life, separated from God even. But it's not a real separation. It's only how you're perceiving it. And you'll be spending more time alone, or at least maybe you will feel alone or want to be alone more often, because Saturn is going through here. Now, the full moon aspecting it maybe will bring you a bit of relief from this, because the full moon gives. The eclipse aspecting that, it could be maybe what you would call somewhat of a crisis. Now, Saturn, though, he's narrowing your path. He's helping you to get rid of anything that is no longer part of your destiny. So maybe it's some train of thought that you tend to have that makes you feel bad. That could be something that you get rid of, that you just let go of that. Because there is some emphasis here with the moon on how you're thinking. And most of our misery is caused by what we're thinking rather than what's actually going on. So just something to think about. And now it's aspecting the 7th house as well, so the house of the partner. And again, interesting, just like for Cancer, the partner's planet is in the partner's house. So there may be a feeling of separation there too. But again, it's just the ebb part. When the water goes out, it goes out for a while and then it comes back. It always comes back. And these are temporary conditions. They don't go on forever, but they are going on for a good reason. Now, the moon, the full moon aspecting the 7th, could bring you something pleasant. And some maybe a small relief from that feeling of separation from your partner. Though the eclipse there could I'm just going to let Neeshee talk about the eclipse, okay? And I really don't feel very versed in the meanings of eclipses. And I'm still not entirely convinced either about how much of an effect they have, though they are affecting me right now because it's aspecting a very personal planet in my chart, which is the moon. Okay, so I'll let you talk about this from this point.
Okay, I would say for Libra, it's similar to what it was for Leo, because they have the first house effect, basically, because the full moon is aspecting their first house. So they should do the same thing, adopt a very simple diet. And in their case, it might not have as much to do with physical toxins as it has to do with emotional toxicity. You know, subtle toxicity. And I see that with the fourth house there, all those planets in Capricorn in the fourth. So if they can adopt a simple dietary regimen, they'll feel a lot better. They'll be able to release what the eclipse is bringing up for them. And that'll also help them assimilate, you know, what the eclipse is asking them to. So, you know, when we're experiencing shifts in our digestion at any level of our being, one of the best things to do is just to take a break so that we can reacclimate to what needs to be acclimated to. So that's what I recommend for Libra. I think that there could be some crises in relationship, the Mars in the 7th.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything more to
well,
say.
You made me think of something. Saturn here. Saturn rules nature.
Mm-hmm.
And spending time in nature would probably be so rejuvenating, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And it also
highly recommended activity.
Yeah, it also makes me think about animals and what animals do when they're not feeling good. They just spontaneously fast. And they don't have to think about it. They just do that. I see it in my little dog. She does that. So she just won't eat for a couple of nights and she'll nibble on grass, and we know that she's dealing with something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing I'm noticing here for Libra too is where Rahu is. And this being in the 11th house too of income, and there's an emphasis on actually maybe not spending so much time home alone and moving more towards working on career things because it's in the 10th. Though during the eclipse, I mean, spending time alone or at home or in nature could give you ideas and renewed inspiration for your career or your business, your job. So that was like the only other thing that you made me think of when you were talking. Anything else for you? Okay, on to Scorpio rising, sun or moon. So for Scorpio, the full moon and the eclipse is in the 10th house, aspecting the 12th, the 3rd, and the 6th. So the 10th house, it's basically career in general, success in general, also your reputation, your father, and your visible actions with the things that you do in the world, how people see you. So there's a full moon there, so there's something that's giving, but the eclipse there too, maybe something hidden, or maybe something hidden coming to light. I'm not really quite sure what that is. I would actually really like it if people told us how this goes. It'd be interesting for us to see, because everybody has their own set of circumstances, and there's just millions of ways that this could manifest in a person's life. Of course, every person who has Scorpio rising is going to have something in common with all other Scorpio rising people in terms of what happens, but the situation, the circumstances will be unique to them. So if you wouldn't mind like writing us, that would be great. Okay, so the 12th house here, expenses perhaps, and spiritual retreat. meditation, Hatha yoga, like Neeshee was talking about in one of the other signs. I don't remember which sign it was now, but it's a good thing to do for you too. The third house is really heavily emphasized here for Scorpio rising. So this makes me think learning new skills, doing difficult things, because you've got 3 so-called malefic planets in this house, which is a good placement for malefic planets because it helps you to do things that are difficult to do, especially when you're building a skill of any kind. You know, it's not always, you're not always able to be at that point in the development of the skill where it's just hard enough to be challenging, but yet not too hard so that it's discouraging. Now, when you have these malefic planets here, it helps you to get past the part where it seems like it's too hard. You'll gain a little bit more ground and a little bit more ground. So that's, I think that's the thing that comes to my mind for the third house. Now, the sixth house and the ascendant lord, which is Scorpio rising, is ruled by Mars, and Mars is aspecting that. So there's some emphasis here too on the body and on the health. And it's a good time to start health regimes because Mars gives you that push energy to start it, and the inspiration to do things that maybe you didn't want to do before, that required maybe too much self-discipline because you were interested in other things, or was just too difficult for you before. You didn't want to exert the energy. Well, now you can exert the energy and make some progress in that area. So again, here's an emphasis on health. So I am going to turn it over to Neeshee to talk about this.
I think the main thing that stands out to me about Scorpio is the full moon in the 10th. I think Scorpio being an internalized sign and quality altogether, this full moon is going to be beckoning them to manifest themselves in a new way, to bring their inner authenticity to an external form. And I think health-wise, with that Mars in the 6th house, definitely interesting. I think they might have a good opportunity to burn through a lot of toxicity, you know, because like I said, fire is the element of purification.
Yeah.
And with eclipses, no matter what kind of eclipses they are, where they're happening, there is always a theme of purification. So I think it's good to participate in that as much as possible with meditation, with good diet, with yoga, and really all of the things that I've recommended to specific signs here are also applicable by everybody, you know, and are useful to everybody. They are universal remedies. So I think Scorpio should trust their intuition, which is usually pretty strong for them, and see what feels right and consider the ways in which they want to manifest themselves, you know, at another level.
Okay. It's with the Mars in the 6th, of course, I think of acupuncture.
Yeah, that's
and,
good.
You know, acupressure. Visiting.
Energy therapy, you know, acupuncture.
Right.
Qigong. Massaging.
Ayurveda too, right?
What was that?
Ayurveda as well, because the 6th in the body, it has to do with the intestines.
Right.
Digestion.
Exactly.
I notice that whenever Mars is going through my 6th house, I tend to get heartburn a lot more easily. Mm-hmm. And I eat a lot more raw food during that time because it's alkaline food.
Right, exactly.
You can't indulge in anything acidic at all during that time. So if you're experiencing that, this is why. And it just means, you know, eat more cooling raw foods like salads. I notice that when that happens for me, I just have to eat salad pretty much. And then I don't have any heartburn at all.
Right. Exactly. It's that kind of intelligence and discrimination that everybody has to apply in these moments, you know?
Right. The other thing I was noticing here too, that Rahu is in the 9th. Right. Ruled by the moon. So this makes me think how your philosophy of life is directly, has a direct impact on what you do for a living and what your career is, you know, the work you do in the world and your reputation. And it's in a water sign, so has to do with your emotional side too, your emotional security. So there might be things going on in your life where you're being called to develop some more emotional security regarding your career, your work in the world, your reputation. Maybe with your reputation. There could be something happening, you know, where somebody is saying something that perhaps cause you to worry about your reputation. But you don't have any control over what other people think of you. So just remember, you have no control over that. The only control you have is over yourself. And even then, I mean, none of us have total control over ourselves either, right?
That's right.
And so your emotional security has to come from who you know you to be. Okay, so Sagittarius. For Sagittarius, the full moon is in the 9th. The full moon and the lunar eclipse is in the 9th. It's aspecting your 11th house, your 2nd house, and your 5th house. So the 9th house is the house of higher knowledge, higher education. So if you're thinking about going back to school, you might want to really research that. The full moon will give you something there. The eclipse may hide something from you there. So do your due diligence. Special trips or a pilgrimage of some kind. It's also the house of luck. So the full moon there gives you something in terms of fortune. It's your guru or your spiritual teacher. Maybe you'll meet somebody or connect with a spiritual teacher. It's regarding your spiritual development and your spouse's siblings. But I'm just going to focus on you, not so much your spouse. Yeah. Maybe a pilgrimage. This seems like it would be a good time to go to some kind of event, like a spiritual event maybe. Though maybe not. If being inside is better, being alone is better during an eclipse. So there's that dual meaning thing there again. Maybe an internal pilgrimage, something like that. Okay, so the 11th house is it's shedding some light on your income, your side ventures, your social life. It's ruled by the moon there, so it's connected to the 8th house of hidden things and your partner's resources. So there'll be some connection there between your partner's resources and your own, your income. And the 2nd house of your resources, your personal resources, your wealth, your family life, food and drink, your speech, even your teeth, teaching, close friends, advisors. So, yeah, there's a lot going on here in the 2nd house. This is also the food that you eat. Now, I've noticed something with people who have Saturn in the 2nd house natally, in their natal chart, especially if it's in its own sign. You tend to like your food really simple. And you're able to also eat a very restricted diet. Now, if this is just there by transit, you may be doing that more now than you ever have in your life. Find yourself being a lot more disciplined about your food. But on the other hand, you might also not be eating really well at all. because Saturn, and these are malefic planets, so you could be maybe trying to fill up some void with food. But I think it's more likely that Saturn is actually separating you from bad things that are not good for you. You might be more sensitive to the effects of food. You might be able to feel them more. Now, the fifth house, creativity, it's the house of fortune, it's children, spiritual practice like mantra, honors from your work. And it's another house of the mind. So Mars going through there, wow, you might be getting lots of creative ideas right now, lots of inspirational downloads. See, what else is it ruling? It rules your 12th house. Maybe ways that you can save money because the 12th house is the house of expenses. But it's also the house of the mind. So a part of your spiritual practice. So what would be associated with Mars for a spiritual practice, Neeshee?
Tantra.
Tantra. Okay. You can look that up. You can Google it if you don't know what it is. So it's your turn.
I think this is looking really nice for Sagittarius because that full moon in their 9th house, and Sagittarius is already, inherently philosophical. So this is like perfect moment for them to be what they are, at another level. Mm-hmm. And Jupiter is on their ascendant already, so that's great. They're already getting that boost. And then the full moon in the 9th, this is a great time, I think, for them to read like spiritual philosophy, spiritual texts, like maybe a kind of spiritual tradition or school of yoga or something that they're not familiar with, or a religious text they haven't read before, some kind of a new philosophical paradigm. They should expose themselves to that. And I think that will be revelatory for them. And I think the eclipse primarily has philosophical connotations for them, a shift in perspectives and attitudes. And then Mars in the 5th house is giving plenty of fuel, for their creativity. So right. I think they're pretty well situated right now.
What would you say from an Ayurveda point of view about all those planets in the 2nd?
I think it's difficult, I think it's more emotionally difficult than physically for Sagittarius. Again, I think everybody can benefit from just taking it easy during the eclipse time, whether that's fasting or doing contemplative practices like I've described before. And, I think reading can be a contemplative practice,
Yeah.
Especially reading spiritual literature can be highly contemplative. So I think that's really the key, That's the key. The key is to go where the healthy energy is, right? It's not necessarily to focus too much on where the pathology is, because the pathology will get corrected if there's enough strength and intelligence in the body. So that's why I typically just try to see where the planets are strong, like where is the energy working? And I just want to push the person in that direction where the energy is working. And I know that if they can mobilize that, then everything else will work itself out.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the spiritual life. That really fuels everything.
Right, exactly. That's the root of it.
Puts it all in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now Capricorn. Well, first our little commercial here. If you're enjoying this video and you want more on Ayurveda and astrology, so just hit like and subscribe. You can leave a comment too, and I will get back to you on it. Maybe not right away, but I will reply to you personally. Okay, Capricorn rising sun or moon. For Capricorn rising, the full moon and lunar eclipse is in the 8th house. It's aspecting the 10th and the 1st house and the 4th house. Okay, so this is a really interesting combination here for Capricorn rising. They've got Saturn, the ascendant lord there, and Saturn going through the ascendant makes them very aware of time and how they're managing time and managing the details of time. This is so interesting. I mean, it's still early in January. And yesterday, with a friend, I have Capricorn rising, we spent a good hour working out exactly what things we're going to be working on in our businesses this year. And there's Mercury right there, right? Mm-hmm. Helping us to do that. And managing time and talking about what was realistic and what isn't realistic to do in 1 year. So I find that really interesting. So it might be going on for a lot of Capricorn rising people, thinking about managing their time over the next year. And Mercury here being the manifestation planet and the management of details planet too. And, you know, K2 being there causing you to look at it much more closely than perhaps you ever have in your life. I would have to say that's true for me. I'm not typically a real details-oriented person, but I have been noticing those things more lately. Now, the moon in the 8th, this is the house of your partner's resources, the house of the occult sciences. It's inheritance house too, and some endings. And it's really more when Saturn is going through this house that there's a career change, but you may be thinking about adding something to your career or subtracting something from your career, changing your path slightly. It's a life house, life vitality house. But being an astrologer, of course, I think that if you're interested in astrology, which you obviously are if you're watching this, then reading something, studying something during this time period would be fruitful for you. It's aspecting the 10th house of career and your reputation and all those things. And let me see. So it's shedding some light there. The full moon tends to give something, to fulfill something. The eclipse, I'm not sure what the eclipse is going to do with that. I'm going to let Neeshee talk about that. Now, Mars in the 4th house. This is the house of inner emotional happiness. And I actually did a video about this and put it out a couple days ago, I believe it was, where we looked at the chart of Byron Katie. And because it's going through my house of inner emotional happiness, I found myself watching her videos. I listened to her all day long recently. And I was thinking about that. I was like, why am I suddenly here? Like, well, Mars is in Aries. It's going to my 4th house. That's why. So I recommend that for Capricorn people. Go to Byron, listen to Byron Katie and watch her work with people. It's applying Mars in a way that is good for your emotional health. Normally, Mars going to the 4th house could be like a turbulent kind of thing. But if you use the techniques that Byron Katie teaches, it can be peaceful. And you can really move forward in the way that you think and how you well, basically your feeling state is caused by what you're thinking most of the time, but how you can track down what you're really thinking and then process it in a way that helps you to come to mental peace. And the full moon aspecting that can help that. So what would you say about that in terms of the eclipse, though, Neeshee?
I think that there's obviously a lot of potential in the 8th house of occult things, and Capricorn people should see what they maybe hadn't seen about that domain before. And if they're already very active in that domain, like if they're an astrologer or they're spiritual practitioners and so forth, then maybe there's something about what they're doing in that domain that needs to be understood at another level. So I think it can be very insightful. and rejuvenating, you know, even if it is initially challenging. And, you know, we see that it's aspecting the 10th. So obviously I think that it affects that outer external appearance, you know, the activity of the person. And Capricorn is already very interested in those things, being the 10th sign.
Mm-hmm.
And that's already been a theme of this period of time with Rahu and Ketu and Cancer, Capricorn axis. So I think this is a good time for Capricorns to just really consider what it is that they're doing in their life when it comes to their career and their work. What do they really want to be doing with that? What are the ways in which what they're currently doing is not quite measuring up to their vision, you know, and their real feeling about it? I think that I mentioned that before already, but I'm mentioning it again because with the full moon lunar eclipse, there's going to be some insights about that, I think. And that's going to help them manifest that 10th house at another level. And, you know, as part of all of this, there's Mars in the 4th house, which can just be a kind of emotional restlessness, you know, which is normal in times of change and shift. You know, when our consciousness is shifting, we feel initially restless at the level at which we currently are, because that level is being changed, you know? So it's like the occasional heartburn. It passes, and with the appropriate discipline, it's no longer an issue.
Well, you know what, I was also thinking too last month, when we were talking, or maybe it was that other video we did on the partial solar eclipse, but you were saying that the eclipse has a real positive side to it as well. It's not just a negative thing because it's bringing darkness. There's it's related to soma somehow. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, darkness reveals where there's a potential for light. So eclipses can be very revelatory and rejuvenating for that reason.
Okay.
It's not just a negative. It's not just an obscuration, but it's also the potential to, you know, drink nectar, as we discussed before, you know. But you can't drink that nectar until you're whole, until you're in resonance with life. So Rahu and Ketu are just pointing out the places, you know, the different ways in which we're not fully resonating with the natural flow of life.
Mm.
And so eclipses are a time to notice that and to come into a greater alignment. And that's why they're a potentially nectarous event in which we are, you know, enlivened, in which we are consuming the soma. Or they're a time in which we simply feel poisoned and lost in our own pathologies, you know. It depends on the level of maturity and consciousness we can bring to that event.
Well, I'm certainly liking that interpretation of it better than most interpretations that you tend to read about, right?
Yeah, most are pretty ominous, you know.
Yeah.
It's only 50% of the story.
It's like, how helpful is that really?
It's not really helpful. It's just like, stay inside, shut your doors, make sure you chant, and hope that you're alive the next day. Yeah, right. And that nobody in your family dies and that you still have crops. That's kind of that. That's what the Vedic texts basically say.
I know. But that's from, yeah.
That's a certain orientation, you know, there's a philosophy behind that makes sense. But there's another philosophy that, you know,
goes deeper.
Brings it, exactly, goes deeper, brings another perspective of how it's just an opportunity. And people can fail to fulfill that opportunity for sure, or they can utilize it. And when we utilize these opportunities, we experience a lot of growth, and that feels good.
Yeah, that's true. And like I said in one of our, I think the video where we talked about eclipses, oftentimes you don't notice any effect at all.
Right.
So it kind of just depends on where it is in your chart.
Depends where it is in your chart. And certain types of people will be more attuned to that kind of thing than other people, you know?
So, okay. Now Aquarius. For Aquarius, the full moon and the lunar eclipse is in the 7th house of the other, the partner. It's aspecting the 9th, the 12th, and the 3rd. Okay, so this is an emphasis on relationship here, on the partner. And because it's the full moon, even though, yes, it's the full moon, there could be something really good here. Some kind of soma or nectar, as Neeshee says, for the relationship, because the full moon gives as well. I mean, how long does the eclipse actually last? I mean, the full moon itself lasts longer than the eclipse.
That's true. The full eclipse will start at about 10:41 Central Time and conclude at about 11:12. 11:12 won't be the conclusion, rather. That'll be like the maximum point. It's about, a couple of hours at the most, 2 to 3 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I set this chart to Greenwich.
Right.
Yeah, in the United Kingdom, just because it's people from all over the world.
It's universal.
Yeah, so, okay. Now, the 9th house is, spirituality, higher knowledge, higher education, special trips, pilgrimages. It's also luck. And it's the guru or the spiritual teacher. It's spiritual development. So the full moon aspecting this house and thinking about the eclipse the way Neeshee was just talking about it for Capricorn rising, you might want to go back and listen to that, can really bring something very fruitful here for the 9th house in terms of, all the things that I just mentioned there. Let's see, what else was I going to say about the 9th house? It just came and went. Well, so let's move on to the 12th then. So for the 12th house, it's aspecting the 12th house, and you're having Saturn here. It's the ascendant lord in the 12th. You may be wanting to retreat anyway, since Saturn has been here. Saturn's been there for about a year now, just a little over a year. And you've been maybe wanting to spend more time alone and to simplify everything. I have a friend with with Aquarius rising, excuse me, and Saturn has been transiting through her 12th, and she has been paring down her life. I mean, getting rid of things, spending more time alone, even limiting her cell phone use. Like having a message on there saying, I only pick up messages on this day at this time. So that's how much she's really utilizing that Saturn in the 12th house. She's spending a lot of time. We sit together, we meditate together. And so she's been spending a lot of time doing even more of that. And so that's one of the ways it can manifest. It could also mean, too, that maybe you're spending some money on your health because Saturn is the ascendant lord. Now, the full moon aspecting this house and the eclipse, you know what? Here's a technical thing that I didn't think of until just now. Now, an eclipse doesn't actually cast aspects, does it? Just the moon itself does.
The moon itself does.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe the eclipse has an effect on these other houses or not. I'm not sure. But the moon definitely is aspecting these other houses. And we're using the Gemini aspects, which are manifesting aspects.
Right.
So, so the moon is the 6th house lord, and it is full, and it's aspecting the 12th. So maybe you're just spending some money on your health. That's one of the ways that it can manifest. So let me see. It's also aspecting the 3rd house of skills, communication, siblings, your daily routine, mechanical ability, interesting. So with Mars there, you may find that you're doing some fixer-up stuff around the house. Things that you wanted to have fixed, that now maybe you're thinking, well, maybe I can do it myself. So you try to fix it yourself. Could also mean too some communication with siblings, doing something with siblings, maybe just nothing more than a conversation with a sibling. With the full moon aspecting, it's something good. It brings something good, some kind of giving thing. Okay, that's all I have for now. How about you, Neeshee?
I'm really just seeing that seventh house with the full moon, and being in an eclipsed moon, I think it's just definitely going to be something coming up in relationships. But like you said, there's an opportunity to drink some soma there. It's just how you use this and letting this be something that's a purifying event. When something is purifying, it's eventually rejuvenating. So we just have to follow it through to its completion. So I think definitely things coming up in relationship for Aquarius. And that Saturn, Mercury, Ketu in the 12th. I liked the description you were giving of how one of your clients or your friends was using these conjunctions. I think that's a good example of a healthy approach to the 12th house for Aquarius right now. There's a lot to let go of. There's a lot to hone in on. And with Ketu in the 12th, it's obviously a good time for spiritual practices.
Oh, yeah.
So definitely that's a good thing to do. I don't really have anything else to say. I think the key for Aquarius is to focus on what's happening in their relationship or relationships, and see what work they need to do there, what gets brought up by this. That's the key area.
Yeah, remember the full moon gives, because it's not in eclipse for the whole time that the moon is full. So there's something nice too. There's something pleasant. Okay, so Pisces, the last sign. So Pisces rising, sun or moon. And for Pisces, the full moon and the lunar eclipse is in the 6th house, aspecting the 8th, the 11th, and the 2nd house. Okay, so the 6th house, again, is typically a health house. It's also digestion. It's part of health. It's also power over enemies. Now, the enemies can be outside of you or they can be inside of you. Like maybe you have some kind of health routine that you're having a really hard time being consistent with. Well, the full moon there maybe can help you to be more consistent with it, especially because it's in a fixed sign of Leo. It's also the healing arts. It's military. It's employees. So those are the general significations of the 6th house. But since we have an Ayurveda emphasis on these full moon forecasts that Neeshee and I are doing, Neeshee will talk more about that in particular for Pisces rising. Aspecting the 8th house, partner's resources, your bond with your partner, the house of the occult sciences. So it's shedding some light there. It'd be a good time to further your studies in astrology if that's what you're interested in, or the cards, or anything else, like whatever your psychic gifts are, because everybody seems to have some psychic gift, and a spiritual gift, I guess you could call it. Maybe you can develop that. The 11th house, look how much is going on in the 11th house for Pisces rising. Saturn, Mercury, Ketu there. Though, even though there's a lot of energy happening there because the planets are there, Rahu is actually pulling you more towards the 5th. Yeah, so it's pulling you more towards following your own personal inspirations, whereas the 11th house is more of a social house where you're sharing your creativity and your spiritual inspirations. And it's an income house too, just because it's the 11th. So maybe there's some emphasis there on building some long-term secure, like maybe, what do you call it? The stock market. Yeah. Mercury rules the stock market. And Saturn is secure things. So maybe you might want to think about investing in some secure things. And I really don't, that's not my area of expertise, but this is what it's looking like to me. That's what I'm seeing. And then Rahu over here, perhaps inspiring you to be creative and come up with some ideas of ways to bring in more income. Now, Mars in the second house, okay, this is the house of the speech, of your voice. And it being here, now in a natal chart, having Mars in the second house is typically not a good thing for family life or relationship. And I think the reason for that is because the second house is a feeling house, where Mars is a logic planet. And he's not interested in feelings, like, at all. So I would just say maybe be a little careful of your speech about it at this time. But generally speaking, maybe not so much conversation about those kinds of things. That's just what comes to my mind. Now, it's being aspected by a full moon. So I'm thinking this is something positive. See, what else? The second house is what you eat too, what you eat and drink. So you may like spicy stuff right now. I'm not kidding you. I've noticed people who natally have Mars in the second house tend to like really spicy food and to put a lot of spicy stuff on their food. And anyway, so, and there's a mutual aspect going back and forth here between Mars aspecting the sixth and the moon aspecting the second. So what would you say about that, Neeshee, in terms of Ayurveda, the health?
Well, I think it's good because Pisces is a water sign. So if we just take the signification of Pisces, then we can see that there's more water element. So I think the fire of Mars and Aries is good for them. And I think the fire of the moon in Leo is good for them. So I think this is a beneficial aspect between the second and the sixth. I primarily think that, yeah, this is the full moon that's happening in the sixth house. It's for Pisces, you know. They're getting the moon in the sixth. So they need to be the most health conscious of any of the signs during this time. And I think they should, I think fasting is really the way to go. You know, fasting or light diet, like I said. Or they can make use of any of the recommendations I made so far, whether that's fasting, light diet, yoga routines, pranayama, meditation. I mean, Pisces are generally already usually interested in spiritual things on some level. So that some of those might not be new suggestions, but I think, you know, the key to overcoming that sixth house is just to liberate it, struggle, you know, and sometimes the best way to do that is to take a break. Let the shift happen. And Pisces will be already pretty attuned to this, being more psychic in nature. So it shouldn't be that hard for them, but I would suggest really cleaning up their digestion during this time. Cleansing, fasting, light diet.
Yeah, especially during the eclipse.
Especially during
before the eclipse, actually. You said 12 hours before, right?
12 hours before is what's traditionally recommended.
Okay. So any last thoughts here?
No, I think we've given some good guidelines. People should always remember that these are very subjective things, and the particulars with which it manifests for everyone is going to be unique, but hopefully we've pointed out some core patterns and archetypes and described some of the essence of these configurations in this full moon and eclipse, and it's a lot going on. So I'll be especially interested to hear, you know, anybody's reports.
Yeah, I would too. It would be appreciated, actually, because as astrologers, we're kind of like researchers by nature. We want to see how these things actually manifest in as many people's lives as possible.
Exactly.
You know,
We want data. We like to,
we want
see how
data.
these things actually play out. And a lot of my astrology, at least, is just based on my interactions with people and seeing like how people are based on their charts. Like that's how I learn. So I'm always open to learning more.
Yeah, me too. It's so endlessly fascinating. I mean, it's the science of light, right? So
That's
it's
right.
science, and for science, we need data. We need information. Okay, so now I just want to remind everyone to watch the sign for your rising sign, but you can also watch the sun and the moon. And the more of them you watch, the more information you're going to get. Because, Neeshee and I, we didn't repeat ourselves on every point in every sign. So thank you for watching, and we will see you again next month for the full moon, which will probably be in Virgo. Yes, I'm assuming it's going in that direction.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. See you then.
Bye.